My name is Margaret Wilson, and I am 68 years old. For most of my life, I believed I was a lucky woman. Life had not always been easy, but I always told myself that every sacrifice was worth it, because at the end of the day, I still had my family. I once had a very simple family. A good husband, a loving son, and a small home filled with laughter. My husband, Daniel Wilson, was a quiet man. He worked as a construction engineer for nearly 30 years. Daniel was not the type of man who used big romantic words, but he showed his love through responsibility and care. We married when I was 23. A year later, our son was born. We named him Andrew. I still remember the first moment I held Andrew in my arms. He was tiny, red-faced, and crying so loudly that one of the nurses laughed. Daniel looked at the two of us and said something I will never forget. "This boy is going to grow up strong." I didn't know if he would grow up strong, but I knew one thing. I would give him everything I had. Andrew grew up like most boys. He loved baseball. He loved riding his bicycle. And he absolutely hated eating vegetables. During summer evenings, I would stand by the kitchen window and watch him play outside with the neighborhood kids. Daniel used to say Andrew was the pride of his life. When Andrew turned 16, Daniel taught him how to drive. When Andrew graduated from high school, Daniel clapped louder than anyone else in the auditorium. But 2 years later, everything changed. Daniel died from a sudden heart attack. There had been no warning. The night before, we had dinner together like always. The next morning, he never woke up. Andrew was 20 years old. And I was 46. From that day forward, my life had only one mission: to make sure Andrew had the future his father wanted for him. I worked 2 jobs. During the day, I worked at the city library. At night, I did part-time bookkeeping for a small store. Sometimes I didn't get home until almost midnight. Andrew would often fall asleep on the couch, his textbooks scattered everywhere. I would cover him with a blanket, turn off the lights, and sit there for a moment just watching him sleep. And every night, I told myself the same thing. It will all be worth it. I saved every dollar I could so Andrew could go to college. The day he received his acceptance letter, I cried. Andrew hugged me and said, "Mom, I promise I'll take care of you someday." And I believed him. I truly believed him. Andrew graduated with a degree in business. Soon after, he started working for a real estate company. Within a few years, he was earning more money than Daniel and I had ever made combined. I was proud of him. More proud than I could ever describe. Then one day, Andrew brought a woman home. Her name was Linda. Linda was beautiful, confident, and very ambitious. She worked in marketing for a large company. The first time I met her, I tried my best to make her feel welcome. I cooked a large dinner. I asked her about her job. I listened to her stories. She smiled politely, but there was always something distant in her expression. At the time, I told myself I was imagining things. Andrew loved her. And that was enough for me. 2 years later, they got married. I helped them buy a house in the suburbs. To be honest, I paid for most of it. It was money Daniel had left me after we sold a piece of land he once owned. The house cost nearly $900,000. But I didn't think about the money. Family helps family. That was how I had always believed life should work. A few years later, my grandchildren were born. Ethan came first. 4 years later, Sophie was born. I loved them more than anything in the world. Every weekend, I visited Andrew's house. I cooked meals, played with the kids, helped babysit whenever Linda needed a break. For a long time, I believed my life was peaceful and complete. But slowly, small changes began to appear. At first, Andrew started calling less often. There was a time when he called me almost every day. Then it became once a week. Then once a month. Linda often explained that they were busy. Work, school activities, family responsibilities. And I understood. I truly did. But deep inside, I began to feel like I was slowly being pushed out of their lives. The holidays changed too. We used to celebrate together every year. But Linda started saying they had other plans. Trips, dinner with friends, or simply wanting family time. I never wanted to be a burden. So I always smiled and said, "That's okay." Then came that Sunday evening. Andrew's birthday. Linda had called me a few days earlier and said they were planning a small dinner. "Margaret, you should come." I was happy. I bought Andrew a nice watch. And I baked the apple pie he had loved since he was a child. When I arrived at their house, the lights were bright and warm. I could hear laughter inside. I smiled to myself. I thought it would be a wonderful evening. I was wrong. When I stepped into the dining room, I saw the long table already set. Candles. Wine glasses. Beautiful plates of food. Andrew sat at the head of the table. Linda beside him. My 2 grandchildren sat across from them. And 4 of their friends filled the remaining chairs. I stood at the doorway for a moment. No one stood up. No one pulled out a chair. Every seat was already taken. I thought maybe they were joking. So I said lightly, "Well, it looks a little crowded tonight." Linda laughed softly. "Yes, it's a bit tight." But I noticed something. There was still space to add 1 more chair. So I walked toward the corner and reached for one. That was when Andrew spoke. "Mom." I turned to look at him. He sighed. "Mom, tonight is a dinner for my close friends and my little family." I didn't understand. "Andrew, I am your mother." He looked down at the table for a moment. Then he said the words that broke my heart. "Mom, could you eat in the living room instead?" The entire room went silent. No one said a word. No one protested. It felt like something inside my chest had stopped. 30 years of raising my son. And now, I wasn't even allowed to sit at the table. I looked at my grandchildren. Ethan stared down at his plate. Sophie looked at me, but she said nothing. Linda calmly took a sip of her wine. As if everything happening was completely normal. In that moment, I realized something painful. I no longer belonged there. Maybe it had been happening for a long time. Maybe I had simply been too blind to see it. All the signs suddenly made sense. The fewer phone calls. The missed holidays. The polite excuses. Everything fit together. I was no longer part of Andrew's family. I stood there quietly for a moment. Then I smiled. Not a happy smile. Just a calm one. I placed Andrew's birthday gift on the table. "Happy birthday, Andrew." He looked surprised. Linda did too. Perhaps they expected me to cry. Or argue. But I did neither. I simply turned around. And walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one said, "Mom, wait." No one followed me. When the door closed behind me, the laughter inside the dining room continued. As if I had never existed. I drove home in silence. Rain had started to fall. The streets were nearly empty. When I arrived home, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I sat quietly in my kitchen. The walls were still covered with old photographs. Andrew as a little boy. Andrew at his graduation. Andrew on his wedding day. I stared at those pictures for a long time. And then I realized something. If someone does not respect you, walking away is not a loss. Sometimes, it is the only way to save yourself. But there was something Andrew and Linda didn't know. The house they were living in, the house worth nearly $900,000, was still legally under my name. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "Richard," I said, "we need to talk." He asked gently, "What happened, Margaret?" I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. Then I said something I never thought I would say. "Richard, we need to change my will. Because if my son truly believed that I was just an old woman who no longer mattered, then he was about to learn a lesson. One he would never forget. To be continued. Stay tuned for the next episode.